Hi there. Today's topic is looking at the dashboard, the playlist, and then reviewing again the overall structure of this MVC pattern we're starting to get to grips with. We'll start with the dashboard, just reviewing again that particular controller. It's kind of instrumental to how our application initiates a range of activities. And we're going to look again at the two actions, the two methods in that controller, precisely what they're doing. We'll then go look at the playlist controller that we're going to introduce. We need to make a modification to the dashboard controller such that as we list out the playlists, they're actually links. And then when we click on those links, we can see the playlist tracks. So we're studying that in detail in this section. Finally, we're going to put all that together by looking at the MVC pattern. This is the technical approach we're taking to putting together a web application. It's not the only way of doing things, but it's a fairly well accepted pattern in this style of application. And we'll tour that. We have a little kind of animation to give us a feel for the structure of that. One lab this week then, which mostly implements exactly what we've been discussing in this talk here. Okay, best of luck with that, and more topics to follow later this week. Dashboard controller. Let's have a closer look at how this controller works. This is the code. We've seen it before. We've got two methods, an index method, which is going to be invoked when this dashboard view is displayed. It's going to list all the playlists. And then if the add playlist button is pressed, this method will be invoked. And this will trigger the adding of a new playlist to the playlist collection. Peeking into that then, this is a high-level view. We notice the first thing we do in the module is import the playlist store. The playlist store, remember, is where we are going to be putting the playlists when they're added. It's also going to be where we recover the playlists when they are requested. We define and export the dashboard controller object. So this is the encompassing object for the controller. We've spoken before about how we're using that elsewhere, so we must export it. It's a const object, it's never going to change, so we must label it accordingly. Then we have our two methods, index and add playlist. Looking at the index method, this is the index method. First thing we do is we create a view data object. That is an object that's going to hold the title for the view and the playlists, that is all the playlists that we recover from the playlist store. We log out to the logs, just information for debug purposes. This is visible on glitch under the logs, and it's also visible if you're using VS Code on the console. And then finally, we render the dashboard view. We're going to be looking for and locating the dashboard view template, a handlebar template from the views folder. And we're passing to it view data. That is this object we've just created here. And we'll leave it up to the template then to figure out what to do with that. This is the add playlist method. In this instance, we are going to be triggered when the add playlist root is activated. We do creating of the new playlist itself here first. That is, we create a new playlist object. It contains just one field, the title the user has entered. That is the value entered in the add playlist form on the dashboard. We log out to the console, the playlist title we've just received. We add it to the store, and then we do a redirect. That is, we ask for the dashboard view to be represented this will have the effect of displaying the newly added playlist. So that's the complete controller there. We've taken out all the spaces we had. Just look at it again in one screen. Hopefully the patterns we're using here now are becoming a bit more apparent, and you can start to make sense of this by having a fairly quick glance and see the structure of the controller itself. Remember, the controller is a list of methods. The two methods in this case are index and add playlist. They're both triggered by specific routes in response to user interaction. Playlist controller. We'd like to adjust now the dashboard such that when we render the list of playlists, Beethoven, concertos, and sonatas in this list, these actually become links. That is, both of these here are hrefs, h tags, a tags, whatever we want to call them. When we click on them, we're going to be opening a new view. This will be the new playlist view. How do we do that? First of all, let's go back to the dashboard controller. I'm not showing it all here now, but remember how it works. It's simple enough. We list all the playlists, and the playlists are displayed using the list playlist template. Now in this revised version, we're not just listing the name, we're going to list out the name or title of each playlist inside an A tag. That is, it's going to be a link. And we can see it here. The link is going to be a new root playlist / the ID of the playlist. And we display the title as before. This means then, if we click on the link, hopefully a new playlist is going to be displayed. So introducing a new view, what do we do at this point? Typically we need a root to support the new view. We're not got to implement the controller, we're just handling the root. We would have a corresponding what we call view and maybe supporting partials. And there may also be updates to the model. We are making some new model modifications, updates, or retrieval as a result of displaying the new information in the new view. So let's look at this one. The roots is going to be a new playlist root. We see it here, and it's identifying a controller, a playlist controller, and its index method. So we can see that there. This is a playlist controller. Then immediately underneath we have familiar structure: import the playlist store, declare the playlist controller. The index method is retrieving the playlist from the store, and then building a view data object and sending that view data object to the render method to the new view, the playlist view. And this is the playlist view. Down at the bottom here we have a menu, the usual menu we're using, and then we've got a displaying of the playlist title. We need a new controller here to support tracks within a playlist. We're calling that the track store. Now we're not going to go into great detail here again on how this is structured. It's kind of like a black box, as we mentioned before. Tracks are stored in a corresponding tracks.json file. You can look at that if you like, particularly if you're using VS Code. It will be hard to see it on Glitch, but it will surface when you restart the application eventually. However, it will work. We will be able to put in and recover tracks from this track store. These tracks then, we're listing them out on the new playlist view. We'll list out the track name, or we'll call it title, the artist, and duration. We also have a new form attached to the playlist view for adding tracks. This is how we will structure that adding track feature. So we're listing out the title on the view of the playlist, And then we're listing out all tracks, and we're providing a form for adding tracks. Both of these are being carried out in their own partial, so we're keeping the view fairly compact. Looking into these two partials then that are doing the heavy lifting on the tracks. List tracks is going to be a simple table, and the table is going to identify the header, these three titles, these three headings, track, artist and duration, and then a loop which is going to iterate over the playlist tracks and output each track as these three values here, title, artist and duration. All of that is being carried out here in the index controller. Retrieve the playlist from the store, put the playlist into a view data, send the view data to the view. The playlist contains all the tracks that we need to get access to. Adding tracks, it's straightforward enough, really. We have a form here. It's got the usual structure, 3 input fields, they're all texts in this instance. We've chosen to keep them as text, and they're title, artist and duration. This is the method which will accept the tracks as a result of the add track button being pressed. We recover the track details here, creating a new track object, and then we add that track to the store. We're doing it here. Track is added, and we redirect to the playlist controller, making sure we re-render the playlist with the new track on the view. Let's see if we can plunge into this whole MVC pattern now again. And we'll take a couple of routes through some interactions and what happens behind the scenes. First of all, pressing the About button. We know what happens here. Press the About button, the About view is displayed. In fact, we also know that pressing the About button triggers a router. The router must consult a controller to service the route, and the controller will respond with an appropriate view. Again, plunging deeper into that, the About button, it's just an A tag, an anchor tag, a href, what I call it, a link on our page. Pressing that sends a request to the server. The About request, that goes to the router. The router is consulted, and we identify the About controller.index action, that is the About controller and the index method, and we invoke that, passing request and response. This is the action here. Its job will be to interrogate the request. In this case, we don't have any extra information, so we largely ignore it, but we use the response to compose a response to go back to the view. That means we render About view. About view incorporates the menu partial. We're showing that coming in here. And it assembles a static page effectively. We're also passing in view data, which is the title for the page. All of this is also in render put together into the layout. So what we've shown here is going into the body of the page. And this is what is sent back to the view. So this is a more complete picture of the machinery behind simply pressing a link on one of the views. Okay, if that gets us somewhere, let's try another example. This time we look at opening a playlist. So we've got a button now, and we press that button, it should open and display a new playlist, including all the tracks in the playlist. Also provided a facility whereby we can add tracks if necessary. Let's just look though at the opening of the playlist. It's the same pattern again. We're in a view, we press a button or a link, that triggers a router. The router triggers a controller. The controller in this instance is going to be interacting with a model, And then when a controller has retrieved any information it needs, sent it to the view is rendered back. So in this instance, our link is in fact /playlist, and it contains the ID of the playlist we want to look at. So the link or the root contains an extra segment that's variable, that's an ID. This goes to the router. Router identifies the appropriate controller, and the index method is triggered, and the index method in this instance is consulting the model, the playlist store. That playlist store is going off and getting the playlist by the ID. It's a JSON data store, so it's retrieving the playlist object. If you look into that store, you'll see it also retrieves all the tracks that are part of the playlist, and they're made available as an object. That object then is sent to the view, the playlist view. Playlist view is going to be listing tracks. Listing tracks is a template that we've already looked at. It's iterating through the playlist tracks, retrieving all the playlist track objects and displaying them on the view. That is reassembled again back into main and sent back to the view with a new view being rendered containing the tracks.